All right, cool. So I'm Austin. I'm going to be moderating today's panel on building developer-first infrastructure. I'm going to first take a moment and allow each of our panelists to give a brief introduction of themselves, starting with Bogdan on the other side.
Hi everyone, Bogdan, one of the co-founders in CTO Tenderly. So other than going to the toilet and being late on the panel, my core vocation is actually helping developers build on top of different chains. So those who don't know, Tenderly is a full-stack infrastructure platform spanning 4 different verticals, developer tooling, and if there's developers in the crowd, you probably use this as a default for debugging, observability and security, production infrastructure, and testing infrastructure. So that's like the briefest one I can put.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Rory Graman, one of the product leaders over at Quicknode. My primary focus is on our ropes as a service product.
Hey everyone, I'm Tomer, Chief Product Officer at the Stellar Development Foundation. Stellar is an L1 blockchain, has been around since 2015, 2014, really focused on real world utility and equitable access. Nothing to do with L2s or rollups, so I'm a Trojan horse to tell you that you don't actually need rollups.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Pranav. I'm the Director of Integrations at the Graph. This title has demoted me, so don't look at that. But yeah, I'm the Director of Integrations at the Graph. The Graph indexes all the blockchain data and almost all the DeFi applications in Web3 and non-social fi applications as well run on the open source software that the Graph created called GraphNode.
Awesome. So to get started, let's first kind of clarify what it means to put the dev first. It's kind of a broad term, so I just want to hear what each of our panelists have, how they perceive this and what it means to put the dev first, starting with Pranav on this side.
Okay, yeah. So I think there have been a lot of ways through which you put dev first. When I used to work at Polygon 4 years ago, we used to give micro, minuscule, small grants, and that's how things started rolling on and coming to Polygon. Polymarket, which is one of the biggest apps in Web3, got a 10K grant, which was given to them after just listening to their idea, and that converted to something so big. And not just Polygon, thousands of those apps were given small, minuscule grants to encourage people to build some important and interesting use cases, which eventually led to a lot of good outcomes. Then a lot of hackathons also went through these chains, and a lot of chains got some dApps that came into existence through that. But I think the landscape of Web3 is changing a lot, and grants right now have become more of a throw of money for a lot of chains and the ecosystems. And you see right now that in the cases of applications like Monad and Mega ETH, which are the up-and-coming chains, they are taking targeted bets on like only 10 dApps and then 10 other dApps and taking important infrastructural stakes in that particular ecosystem. So I think at the end, it is all about building the best use cases. And how do you get that? And I think it has been evolving since a while. It started off with grants, led to some hackathons, and right now is at a stage where people are majorly micro-focused on really interesting, chirpy use cases that can come and build something cool. But at the end, what a developer gets attracted to is not the small grant money. It's generally how much is that application valued in the ecosystem and how much is that ecosystem valued. To put it in perspectives, if you think about Ethereum, if you're building on Ethereum right now and you have a crazy idea, there is still a chance that you won't get that kind of noise that you might expect because the ecosystem is so big. But if you have a really, really interesting idea and you push it to somebody like Monad and Mega ETH, go to their office and tell them, this is what I'm building, this is what it is. They'll give you all the acceleration help, all the VC raise fundings, and make you get through a lot of marketing as well. And that's what's the success of Base in those cases as well. So I think at the end, it's about making your chain shiny for devs and finding the most innovative ways through which organic devs can come and build on your application so that your chain looks really organically growing and progressing.
Shiny for devs. I love that. That's awesome. So Stellar is unique in that, like I said, we've been around since for a while, since 2015. But we actually just last year launched a smart contracts runtime. It's called Soroban, based on WebAssembly, written in Rust. Smart contracts are written in Rust as well. And so we've had this unique opportunity to kind of like take a look around and figure out what it means to actually build for developers, because getting attention in this space as a late mover is not trivial at all. And so I think there's kind of like two main things we focused on. One is really building for a batteries included developer experience from the ground up. Because I think, if you look at a lot of kind of like historically the developer experience in the Web3 ecosystem, and it has been quite terrible, right? I think, until Foundry arrived in like the Ethereum ecosystem, the whole kind of like testing tool set was like really problematic. And I think that really when we built Soroban, we really focused on what it means to be testable and to be like friendly for developers and really push for test-driven development. So we did a lot of things like the entire runtime is actually like this independent crate that you can just do local testing with, and so it's very easy to do local testing, integration testing, unit tests, like fuzz testing using the Rust toolbox from the ground up, and so super shiny for Rust developers. And then on the other side, it's kind of like how the community supports new developers. And obviously, grants, and there's grant programs, and everyone does that. But I also think that it's kind of like how the community is showing their hospitality. And I think that a lot of it is also making sure that you have support from domain experts. So one thing that we did is we set up what we call the audit bank, which is a program that helps sponsor audits for new protocols in the ecosystem. So if you got a grant from the Stellar Community Fund and you met some criteria, we will hook you up with an audit before you launch. And as the protocol grows, and as every time you scale by like an order of magnitude, we will actually sponsor an additional an audit for you, and we've seen that being extremely successful. We've had more than 40 audits, and pretty much every major DeFi protocol on Stellar has been audited.
Very cool. Rory?
Yeah, so first and foremost, if you don't know what Quicknode is, we are a blockchain infrastructure platform. Historically, we've been working on RPC, but over the last couple of years, we've dove more into the tooling, rollups as a service space. So when it comes to developer-first infrastructure, what that means to me is removing as much friction as possible between an idea and a working product. So a developer, when they sit down, they don't want to have to think about standing up their own nodes, managing complex APIs, hosting their own infrastructure. So here at Quicknode, we kind of go a layer deeper. We don't look at it as just developer-first infrastructure. We look at it as a developer-first experience. So what does that mean? So in addition to having highly performant, highly available RPC for 90+ networks, we also offer over 400 guides on different DeFi applications, like launching a token, launching a NFT project, creating a Telegram trading bot. There's only so much that you can do with AI. A lot of the time it hallucinates on what the best ways to do it. And so we've kind of noticed that and have launched all these different guides to help developers who are building out these critical aspects in the DeFi space. And then the last thing is we have access to some of the biggest names in the space. We're fantastic partners with a lot of them. And so many chains, when they're going through the process of getting ready to launch either testnet or mainnet, they need some of those connections. They're not able to reach out directly to themselves, so we'll help them with that aspect. And if you attended us at ETH Denver for the last L2Con, we announced Rollout, which is this roll-up accelerator. We finished it a couple weeks ago. It was a 8-week course with 26 different emerging roll-ups in the space. We led a bunch of panels similar to these ones where we brought in different thought leaders from all different organizations, different settlement, DA layers, how to market your chain, how to get fundraising, and then it all culminated into a demo day. So here at Quicknode, we're really focusing on that developer-first experience because more often than not, it's not super clear on what the right path is to take.
I mean, I would repeat either distribution or tech, which was mentioned here. I maybe want to give huge kudos to you guys. Because, for example, Austin Quicknode compete on RPC, but we were still part of this roll-up thing. And I think this is the developer centricity. It doesn't matter who wins. If the developers win, we all win in this room. And our
But
companies
who's
make
better,
sense.
Bogdan, Quicknode or Tenderly?
Depends on the chain. They're actually much faster in a bunch of cases than us, according to the tip of the chain. I'm not having any trouble saying this. So for real-time chain data, Quicknode is miles ahead of us when it comes to like those milliseconds that make a difference between light and depth, like 20, 30 milliseconds. And then for historical workloads, we're used for a bunch of backfilling, etc., because we excelled there. And I think that's the development centricity. I mean, RPCs is a good example where people have multiple providers for different things or stability or whatever. But I think this is basically why it's important to optimize for devs much more, because all of us want to make successful companies or successful networks, etc. I think a bunch of stuff that people in this space is bullshit, to be completely honest, about, hey, we're development centric, because there's a very small amount of companies, especially ones with tokens, that actually do optimize for the devs. I think the graph is a good example of that, because the hosted service costed graph, I cannot even imagine how many of millions of dollars. But this is public knowledge. I'm not sharing anything weird. But this is the showcase of like developer first. Let's fix this and then do everything else there. So I really like company where they put their money when their mouth is, which I think on this panel is shown. So that's my.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that. All great points, and Tenderly is an amazing tool. We've been copying a lot of stuff from that, so thank you. I do think that there's we're going to talk a lot about creating like the perfect developer experience and bringing developers. That doesn't create product market fit for your product, and so I think that there's kind of like a prerequisite to this idea of like making it easier for developers to come on board, where it's like there's actually like value and there's something to do there. And I think, without naming names, we've seen a lot of ecosystems out there that have had like amazing developer experiences and just like zero product market fit, and so that does not create it.
So what can they do to increase the product market fit then, and how can they attract more devs into the ecosystem who are willing to stay and to continue to build over time?
Yeah, Web3, we're kind of full of ourselves, and we think that it's about bringing
I love
developers.
this panel so far. Sorry, go continue. I
Say
love
that
this
again?
panel so far. Continue, sir.
Because we think it's about like bringing developers to our ecosystem, but at the end of the day, we're building tools, right? And these tools could be used by builders to actually build products that have that bring value to their users and have a classic product market fit, which is something that Web3 is kind of like sometimes forgets about. And so at the end of the day, Stellar is really focused on real world utility. We have stablecoins that focused on payments from the ground up. And so when a builder comes to build something serious on Stellar, they do it because they can tap into 400,000 MoneyGram agents around the world for their on and off ramp, and the developer experience for doing that is great, but it doesn't actually matter. Like even if the developer experience would be shit, like the fact that they actually get that value would make them go through this. And we're seeing a lot of, and Ethereum is like a classic example. Like for many years, the developer experience has been shit, but there has been this kind of like gravitational force around the ecosystem. Solana is a great example. Everyone in the Solana ecosystem will tell you that Solana developer experience is shit, but still you're seeing this like amazing community getting built there. So we can talk about developer experience. I know I don't want to kind of like rug the panel, but yeah, you need a community and you need to offer value to users.
I would say I agree to the developer community thing. So the best way in 2022 to raise $10 million to $100 million was use one sentence, onboarding 1 million people to Web3. And we are building the best developer experience for that. And our layer 2 is going to be the best layer 2 that exists. But if you think about it, that we didn't expand the pie. We just started fighting for the same pie. Everybody was putting a governance proposal on Aave that please deploy on us. Everybody was putting the governance proposal on Uniswap, please deploy on us. And at that time, I think there were certain specific community building application organizations like Solana and Sui that took off. And that's where we lost, we were just fighting for the same pie, instead of increasing the pie, getting developers what they want, which is money, and attention. So I think and even if I go to the ECC stage right now and I see like everybody is building some infrastructure, it's like building the most beautiful city in the world with no people. If we just keep building infrastructure. So it's like having a panel on layer 2's building developer first infrastructure and talking about what you are doing and being a narcissist like that. It's about building applications. It's about building a community of people who use that application and are super pumped to do that. And I think just because we are and VCs were in a race to deploy capital, we just built Web3 stack infrastructure with no business models, including many, including ours as well. We built a lot of we built a lot of experience which was related to building apps, and we built a lot of layer 2s which could compete with each other to provide the best developer infrastructure, but we stopped building apps and the community that would use those apps. And I think this is a high time that we come back to what people want, what they need, instead of what VCs would like to listen to so that they can deploy $10 million to your application.
Anyone else have thoughts?
I mean, my answer for how to find PMF is fund less, so it kind of goes into that.
I mean, product market fit is the biggest thing when it comes to like if you wanted to deploy your own roll-up, but there's also other aspects that go into that as well. Do you have community? Do you have product market fit? Do you have utility? Right. So community, it doesn't make sense to launch a roll-up if you have 10 people using your app. Also, when it comes to utility, you'd think that with Quicknode getting into the roll-ups as a service space that we would just take any role that comes to us, but more often it's me talking with potential chain operators and almost like talking them out of deploying a roll-up, because you shouldn't build a solution in search of a problem. It doesn't make sense if you're launching a successful game and World, for example, right? They were 50% of Optimism's traffic. Makes total sense for them to branch off and build their own chain where they can focus on how gas works. They're not having to compete against other applications on there. And we saw this a huge amount when it came to people on Ethereum trading tokens. When an NFT project drops, now Gwei's at 300, 400, and dApps across the entire ecosystem are affected. And then use case. Product market fit, making sure that you're having a successful product that people are actually liking, not just launching a roll-up to say that, hey, we have a roll-up, we have a custom gas token, and then expect that that's what's going to onboard users and developers in the space. You have to have a very clear value prop on, this is why I'm deploying this chain, this is the purpose behind it, this is how I'm going to drive adoption. And that was one of the accomplishments that we aimed to set out for when we hosted this rollout accelerator.
Now, a question kind of for all of you. Does the process for onboarding devs, is that the same really for onboarding users? Like, are the same things like killer apps what really attract devs into this space or certain ecosystems?
I'll start. So I think that it should be, like the way that you treat onboarding devs should be the same way that you treat onboarding users in general, but sometimes we don't do that. So I think that because this space was built mainly by engineers, I think there's a lot of kind of like engineering state of mind and kind of like the Linux mentality of having like, super specialized modules and every component does kind of like one thing really well. And that meant for a while that developers, while they're onboarding the ecosystem, they kind of like need to go on this like exploration journey to understand, oh, there's kind of like, there's one set of tools for writing smart contracts, there's one set of tools for testing smart contracts, there's one set of tools for indexing smart contracts. And so there's like so many things that you need to wrap your head around before you can actually create something meaningful. And I think that if we were to think about this more kind of like classic product perspective rather than engineering, then we will try to create these, these platforms that, try to bring everything into the same place so that, into the same tooling, more kind of like a vertical integration perspective rather than these kind of like dispersed modules.
I think over the past couple of years, we've been really focusing in on how to make better tooling for developers. But what kind of comes along with that is how is that tooling for developers being passed on to a streamlined user experience for the end user, right? And we look at that ideal new Web3 user as someone who obviously doesn't have any experience in the space. They don't know anything when it comes to wallets. They may have traded on a centralized exchange. But like, I remember my first experience getting into DeFi, it took 24 hours for me to go from a centralized exchange to sending that over to a chain and then bridging that to another chain because the centralized exchange didn't support the chain that I wanted to get to, and then securing my wallet, performing a swap, approvals, signed transactions. And this was several years ago, and we've made significant steps to streamline that process, right? We've implemented account abstraction, social sign-on, things to abstract away from the Web3 kind of developer focus around it into more of that just more general Web2-like experience. And so I think we really have to take more time to focus in on what that end user experience is. It's not that Web3 user who's been in the space for several years and knows their way around. It's that person who's never been in DeFi, that they're maybe just buying their first tokens and they're wanting to sign up for this cool dApp, or they want to play this cool on-chain game that their friend told them about. So I think the more we simplify that process, the easier it's going to get into the space, and then that whole cycle will help fund more innovation in tooling for developers to make things that make it even simpler for the end user.
The way that I look at it is that you can provide three things. I'm going to use the normie stuff or the non-developer stuff first. I'm going to get into dev analogies. You can either provide a pain reliever, you can provide innovation, or you can provide efficiency. Concrete examples. Polymarket is a type of innovation. So like prediction markets weren't. We had Augur, we had a bunch of others, but for the sake of the argument, let's imagine Polymarket was first. Polymarket didn't exist. Normies came because they can bet on the US election. That was new, so that was innovation. You can provide a pain reliever, and I'm going to use both for the second and the third one, stable coins. Pain reliever is if you're, I'm for example from Serbia, so we didn't have access and still don't to a bunch of financial instruments. We had a huge number of bank crashes in the 90s. We had huge inflation where a loaf of bread would be like 10 billion Serbian dinars. So to me, as a pain reliever, it's fairly simple to say, hey, you're working abroad, you want to send money to your mom. That's a pain reliever, very simple. But then Tenderly as a business, we have an SF office, we have a Serbian office. If you say, hey, you can move money around between companies instantly versus doing it over a course of 6 days and then people cutting in, that's also a very interesting one, but it's not a pain reliever, it's an efficiency one. And when you look at it from that perspective for developer tooling, I think that we are not focusing so much because it's very hard, and I do pose this as a challenge, to explain Web3 as a pain reliever. I mean, we're all talking here about literally the opposite. We sell the innovation piece where most of the stuff can be done with a MySQL database. And the third one is the efficiency. And I think the efficiency stuff was being used like 2018, 19, 20 to explain to Web3. So I think what we are actually missing much more in how to onboard developers is analogies and everything else, and actually showing that value and actually dissuading certain people to come to Web3. Because if we're trying to be everything to everyone, we will inevitably fail. But if we try to be the thing for someone, this is how we bring more people in. I know this feels like an answer to this question to me. I'm not sure.
I'm going to expand a little bit on him, but I feel like we are too obsessed on users and developers. And that's a question that is asked to me in every panel that I've been. How do we get users? How do we get developers? And I think we can definitely build infrastructure and do everything that these gentlemen are doing. But I think the most important thing is to basically build value. If your chain or if your ecosystem has value and it has real utility, then people will just come. For example, stable coins like what Bogdan said, or like betting, or like pump.funds, sort of like just simple gamification. It's really, really hard as a developer myself to build on Solana. Their anchor module is not the same version as the Sol C module, which is not the same version as the Rust module. So I always have to pray to God before I make a demo on Solana. However, you see so many devs building, so many community coming along, so many users getting onboarded. Why? Because I feel they provided some sort of a fast chain value that nobody else could. The reason why everybody goes to Cannes is because it has hot weather, it is in Europe, and it has a beach with amazing people. Uh, so it's all about, people come to places when there is value and the infrastructure can be built after that. Funds can be raised after that. Just think about how you can build value and everything else will follow, including users and developers who will stick.
Another point on that was, you all kind of made me think about this, but like when I was looking at statistics, it was that like the amount of monthly active devs peaked in late 2022 and hasn't really broken past that point since. It's held steady, but the amount of established devs in the space has continued to go up steadily. Is that really not a problem then? I guess if we're kind of viewing in that way where, it's really less about the quantity of users and devs in the space right now, and it's more about the, like what we're creating, what we're pushing out that will eventually draw them in.
If you think about like these developer stats that only 1 million developers are building on Web3, but we only have 3 applications which are useful. Like 1 million developers for 3 applications, I think that's already too much, right? And at the end, we are generally what I see, the dApps that I see from the graph's perspective are all, sorry for my language, chain sluts. They build a good AMM, and then they deploy it on 50 chains. And that's the way they get funded, or that's their funding model. At the end, it is all about having maybe only 30 cypherpunks, but bringing something new to the table. Palm.fun is a 10-people team. All the Poly market used to be a 2-people team. So on and so forth for all the decentralized application which got adoption eventually, including Radium, which is like a 7-people team. Jupyter used to be a 20-people team, right? It's not about the number or the quantity, but the value you can create, as I can say again. And 1 million people for only 3 useful applications is already too much. And I think this is high time that we start innovating towards something and not, moving like a herd towards TradFi, towards AMM, towards a lending borrowing protocol. That already exists. That infrastructure exists. We need to scope out beyond that. If I give you an analogy, you think about the internet in the past world. People used to deploy their newspaper on the internet and they called it innovation. But if you see right now, it's much more interactive. Payment gateways, infrastructure, even computers have been built towards that, and that needs more developers. If we have only 3 use cases of people flipping newspaper on the internet, we only needed 20, 30 devs. So right now, we need to have value and prove that, and then maybe the next wave of developers will build. And I personally feel after 2021 of Uniswap's DeFi summer, when it opened a new scope of how tokens can be created, built, and deployed, we have not innovated since. And Web3 is waiting for its real next use case, and maybe then the next 1 million developers will come.
Do you think that stablecoins maybe?
So stable coins are more like a TradFi game, and decentralized stable coins, if they existed, would have their own of course, would have their own use case. But I feel like we need to be much more cypherpunky. We gotta be in. Look at you guys. I've been to all these Web2 conferences. Everybody is wearing suits, and you are in shorts. Shame on us, right? But we need to be. We need to do these sort of cypherpunkish, funky, looking attitude guys who can rob apart and build something new. We need to be the Berlin of all the capitals that exist in the world.
I think we should absolutely be bringing on more newer developers into the space. The reason for that is when you have developers who have been in the space for a long time, they become really good at building with the tools that they're used to. And so a lot of that is tools that they started with years and years and years ago. Like, admittedly, RPC is very dated, right? But the entire Web3 industry is based on RPC. So people have found solutions like indexing, the graph, different ways of being able to access wallet balance historics. But in order for us to do that, we need to be able to evolve from what we were in the past into more of what's going to take us into the future. And so with older devs being, well, not older devs, but like those who have been in the space for a really long time, while they, like I mentioned, are very good at building, we need newer devs with fresh ideas on different problems and how they can solve those problems, and they don't have the same biases and like preconceived thoughts that some of these more veteran developers may have gotten over the year, and feel like they are almost hitting kind of like this ceiling of what new innovation and what new growth they could bring to the space.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we're not seeing a lot of innovation in the actual like financial instruments, and stable coins. Like Stellar had stable coins before they were called stable coins 10 years ago, and there's like innovation that's like marginal gains around like these DeFi instruments, but at the end of the day, all the building blocks are there. And I think that for too long, like we've paraded like smart contracts and DeFi and kind of like the trust minimized part as like where developers innovate, and developers come into the space and they're like, okay, the six protocols that need to exist already exist. Okay, we're out of here. But we really do need the value creation. I disagree that the value creation is like in creating like more innovative kind of like financial building blocks. I actually think that value comes from actual user-facing applications that are putting together everything that we have in place in order to create kind of like a more inclusive set of like everyday financial instruments. Like I'd like to see a world in which you can get like a full stack of financial instruments, stablecoins as your checking account, RWAs as your savings account, DeFi as like as investments, and basically be able to maintain your entire like financial stack in a way that is kind of like more permissionless, more self-custody.
And just to add to that, like being able to abstract away from the idea of chains really being a thing, right? The end user shouldn't care what chain their transaction, if they're sending money to their friend, if they're trading one token from another, they shouldn't have to care about what chain they're interacting on. They shouldn't have to worry about what's this 0x address that I say it's mine, right? I logged in with social sign-on. There's so much that can be done to just simplify, and it really comes down to what is the best UX for these new people into the Web3 space.
Just coming back to your question was, is it a problem that we're stagnating, correct, with the number of developers? I can follow conversations up to 3 levels of depth. This is what I learned about myself. Anyway, I think we should be concerned. I don't really trust those numbers too much, because like when you look at Tenderly usage data, like certain months it feels like everybody's doing Web3, then other months it's like me and the people in the office, and that's it. I think we should be concerned. I honestly believe in Trojan horse-like approaches to getting people to use something via like app chains. And I'm not talking about ecosystem L2s, which also have their place in the world, especially if we start getting L3s, but like application-specific chains like Blackbird, like Zora, like there is the game on Avalanche that I can't remember, a subnet, but because it looks like a server, and I think that's the most important thing. Most innovation always worked either if it's a huge boost, like ChatGPT and others, or that people didn't realize that they started using a new thing. These are my honest thoughts. And I think only then we could do it. If we do it that way, it's a much longer game. Most of the servers, I don't know, this is a pretty outdated thing that I'm going to say, but most of the servers are still not in the cloud, but they're actually like on-premise stuff in the world. Probably now that split is much different. But it's a very, 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 very long game to play.
Kind of with the tools then, is innovating with tools and making it easier to onboard devs really what we should make the core focus, or should it be more so that, like we were talking about earlier, making it an attractive industry where people want to build in,
I think it's the latter. I think AI, I mean, you could argue that ChatGPT with their APIs and then Claude and everything else brought people in because it's easier to use AI, that's true. But then you also hear these horror stories of just people saying what they can build to raise funds, which by the way is similar to 2021, 2022 in our space, etc. And I think if you make it too easy, then you start getting stuff that's useless. So, for example, a bunch of AI-enabled things don't necessarily need the AI. Just like how a to-do app doesn't need a blockchain to be completely, well, it is true. So yeah.
Cool. We're almost out of time, so really just one question kind of to close it off. If you could, not even just about the developer experience, but just if you could fix one thing about Web3 in general right now, what would it be for each of you in a few short sentences?
Me first? So I have two completely opposite things that I would do. So either or, completely make it non-financial, or just say 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, we're just doing DeFi and that's it. Because I think we have this dark age of 3 years where we were trying to do NFTs, which by the way, I think have their state thing in the world, but when you look at it, mainstream can only perceive us from one lens. It was DeFi first, then it was NFTs. Even though when NFTs were happening, there were so many other things happening. We had the deepen push, which was a shorter one, but either way, either to completely double down or we're doing financial rails and that's it, because I think we would have been, like the genius stuff, everything that's happening would have happened much sooner, at least my overly simpleton view of the world.
Can we do it right now? Can we double down on financial instruments?
I feel that the stablecoin stuff is doing that right now. I think the Robinhood announcement and everything else that people are doing, I think that's happening now. But I feel like I will literally hurt myself physically if in 3 years we're like, how can the wallet UX be different? Like, that's not what's going to bring people in. It's like this doubling down on a singular focus and then everything else is a second order effect.
If I could wave a wand, I would say better interoperability between all the different rollups that are deploying. If you look at when Uniswap first launched, right, there was just one or very few amount of liquidity sources on Ethereum, but then you had SushiSwap that launched, you had PancakeSwap, QuickSwap, BuySwap, you had all these different AMMs that deployed, and suddenly you had all of this fragmented liquidity all existing on one chain or a few different chains, but it was, you'd have to like price shop between all these different AMMs to find out what was the best route to go. And so then there came along the idea of these DEX aggregators that unify liquidity where it abstracts away from the idea that I'm interacting with Uniswap or SushiSwap within the same transaction. And I think we're going to see kind of that growth with rollups, the same that we did with these different AMMs or decentralized exchanges, blending protocols, all these different ways that are kind of fragmenting liquidity across the throughout the DeFi ecosystem. And so building out a better solution for interoperability between different chains, right? You have OP's superchain, but it's very restricted in what you can actually do. You can't customize it specifically to your use case. You have to fit a very templated format in order to become a part of this superchain. There's bridges that only will allow you to connect to different chains, and with that, you can only bridge certain assets. So I think the more that we continue to deploy these roll-ups and get more fragmented liquidity across the DeFi landscape, there's going to be a much more significant need for instant interoperability between these different chains, and it's going to be needed in order to onboard users into your ecosystem.
I really like the idea of doubling down on the financial use case and be very clear about that. I don't think that crypto needs to be sexy. I don't think we need to attract developers because it's cool to be in crypto. I think we need to attract developers because it's utilitarian. And if you are building an app that has like this financial use case, then going into like Stellar's dev docs should be as simple as as Stripe dev docs, and you don't go to Stripe and confronted with the question of like, where do I deploy my app and what platform do I do my roll-up shenanigans on, right? So, yeah.
So if we had to change maybe two things about Web3 in my perspective, at this current stage, one would be validation. Just think about 2017. All of us were like, yeah, we are going bankless. privacy, F the regulation, US is not gonna this and that. And now we are at a stage where it's like, ETF please, banks please use us, someone please get my exit liquidity. So I would definitely try to, encourage an environment where we are not looking for validation and not building what we were building against, not building with what we were building against. Although that has its own use case, stable coins and maybe DeFi has that, but something out of the entropy will only come when we are not looking for validation. Secondly, I would say we need to stop money exits. The reason why we have so many infrastructure projects, so many people just building the same whatever XYZ, X for ZK, play to X, play to what, whatever, all these already pre-existing narratives and building on that is because eventually it's really easy to launch a token and for the founders to start getting exits. It's really important to get back to the fair mining days when everybody was struggling to reach PMF, then struggling to reach a token launch and then do talk to exchanges, talk to market makers and talk. So validation and quick money exits need to be changed so that we can build the next good use case and value generation in Web3 that would attract developers, users, and everything else that we talked about in this panel.
Awesome. We are out of time. Let's give a quick round of applause for our panelists.